in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever fits for the part of the world you're in. I'm Judy Neal. I'm the founder of Edgewalkers International, and really, really happy to have you here with us today. In this week of Thanksgiving in the United States, a real sense of gratitude for this community. And we have a special guest today that Amy has brought into our community. And Amy is one of our certified Edgewalker facilitators and an incredible leader. She does work on creativity at work that is beautiful, inspiring, and powerful. And Amy, I've talked to a number of your clients, and it's amazing to me how many of them say, Amy has changed my life. Amy is making such a difference to me. And so we're so happy to have you here, Amy, and happy to have you introduce Erin. Over to you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you. Thank you for those lovely words. And thank you everyone for showing up to the cafe today. Today, I've been waiting for today because I am so excited for what I'm anticipating what we're going to talk about today. What I'd like to do before I introduce our cafe guest is I'd like to pose a contemplation, and I'll actually drop it in the chat, but if you're in by phone, I'm going to say it out loud. If everyone could just take a minute to get centered with us, take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I want you to think for about a minute, if time were an entity, what would you want to say to it? If time were an entity, what would you want to say to it? For anyone that's just joining, we're having a contemplation right now. If time were an entity, what would you want to say to it? Anyone want to share what's coming up for you? Or what came up for you? That quick question. Quick, deep question. I mean, it sound easy.
I'll share, Amy.
Okay.
I was surprised, and thank you so much. That was a beautiful contemplation. So I actually thanked time for the ebbs and flow that work with me as a co-creator. I have this year gone through a lot of changes, and I think there were times earlier on where I felt like I'm not getting enough done or I have too much to do. And as of recent, I have been grateful that what I'm supposed to accomplish is flowing with the ebbs and tides of our ebbs and flows of the tides of time. And I'm feeling that in a really positive way.
Love that. Aligning with the ebb and flow of life. Thank you, Tracy. Can we maybe have one more person share or drop your thoughts in the chat? Monica, I see you. Hi.
So my message to time is, welcome, my friends. How can we partner even more beautifully together?
Gorgeous. Thank you. Well, the person that posed that contemplation today is our guest, Dr. Aaron Tabacco, and he is a dear friend of mine. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and I'm going to then turn over the cafe to him to have us think more about breaking time and quantum presence. Dr. Aaron Tabacco has been leading people through growth and change in some of life's most challenging contexts for over 30 years. He is currently the Director of Staff Experience at the UCSF Department of Medicine and a Berkeley certified executive coach. Aaron is known across many organizations and populations for his talents in coaching, leadership and organizational development, mediation and teaching. A former professor of nursing and senior program administrator, he enjoyed simultaneous roles in clinical practice, education, and research. He is an internationally published and regarded scholar in the areas of neurobiology of learning and behavior across the lifespan. Throughout his career, Aaron has focused deeply on the professional comportment of students, faculty, staff, and executives, and has earned a strong reputation for insightful and compassionate coaching and communications, as well as the ability to deliver transformational feedback. He is a committed ally and engages in and leads a number of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts in his roles. Additionally, he has served a number of individuals and groups as a mediator, helping to bridge communication and values conflicts that otherwise prevent forward movement in high-stakes circumstances. Talk about an edgewalker. Overall, he uses his former career in education as a nurse to guide organizations in their journeys to become holistic, human-centered communities. As a graduate and coaching faculty of the Berkeley Executive Coaching Institute, Aaron's approach to his clients centers upon high-level presence, emotional authority, and personal authenticity. In 2022, Aaron founded his private coaching practice, the Lucas Group, which provides both individual and cohort coaching engagements to senior professionals across industries and the globe. And outside of his professional work, Aaron is an author, avid reader, student artist, musician, and the father of 3 young adult sons with whom he explores the awe-inspiring geography of the Pacific Northwest. He makes his home with his husband in Vancouver, Washington, and travels frequently to the San Francisco Bay Area for work. He is a dear soul brother of mine that I love. Aaron, thank you for joining us today. And the cafe is yours.
Oh, my goodness. That is such a generous intro, Amy. Thank you so much. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for welcoming me to the community. I am truly humbled, as I was saying, as I logged into the call to Judy and Jimena, that yeah, when Amy reached out, I kind of had goosebumps, and I immediately said yes because I knew it just needed to be, it was meant to be. So thank you for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to some conversation with all of you. I already appreciated so many things. Singapore, Madison, I mean, people are calling from all over the place. And the brief reflective comments at the beginning of partnering with time and welcoming time as a friend, I think perfectly sets us up for our conversation today. As Amy said, my background and training as a researcher and scholar is in the neurobiology of learning and behavior. What I am not is a quantum physicist, but I have had to, I've had occasion the last couple of years to start to bring some of these worlds together for myself, as I have really reflected deeply on my experience of time and my my use of time in my work and in my life. So today, I would like to begin with some storytelling that can maybe set up some context for what I hope are edge walking ideas for you to consider and use in your own work and lives. I would like to dial us back. I'm already using a linear metaphor for time, back to the spring equinox of 1995, where I was a 22-year-old sort of Twitter-pated and deeply closeted Mormon boy, kneeling across an altar from Stephanie, who would become my wife that day, very early in the morning. So this was basically almost sunrise, where we, in the Mormon tradition, in what's called a sealing room, a marriage room, or square room, looking across an altar, kneeling together, looking at one another. And behind us are these wall-sized mirrors that, of course, create this illusion of infinity, which is a beautiful metaphor. And everything I knew about me at that time said this was exactly the right thing for my life. And I hadn't done maybe the inquiry that would come later, being a gay man who was convinced probably I was bisexual because I had met and fallen in love with this amazing young woman, who I would learn later, for those of you who I'm sure most of you here are John O'Donohue fans, is better considered my anamkara than a lifetime marriage partner. But there we go. We went through this very solemn and what I would honestly say was kind of a sterile, brief ceremony, and with lots and lots of the anxiety that happens to newlyweds who are in their marriage ceremony. And when it was all done, you know, we were invited to give each other a kiss across the altar. And with tears in our eyes, we did that. It was, you know, just very sweet and brief and sort of innocent and youthful. But we immediately pulled back and looked into one another's eyes, and we burst into riotous laughter, which is not, in fact, sort of a kosher practice in a Mormon ceremony in a temple. So it made everyone uncomfortable. They started quietly chuckling with us. But what was very interesting was that everyone around us throughout the rest of the day, when they would capture us individually, would ask us, what was so funny? What were you laughing about? And thinking we had some sort of inside joke or whatever. And neither of us could answer the question. We literally had zero idea. There was just some energy of deep relief, comfort, recognition. Something massive had shifted in us in that moment that we couldn't really comprehend. And we just chalked it up to, oh, I don't know, that was just our emotional truth in the moment. Now, as you can imagine, I've already set this up for a little bit of, you know, journeying, because how did that all turn out? This gay young man married to a straight woman. Well, my anamkara and I, 15 years into our marriage, really grounded entirely in this identity crisis of my own, really becoming clear that I was in fact gay and had to deal with that, and had become spiritually very, very ill, nigh unto death. Honestly, it was a very difficult time, and my mental health was very poor, and I was truly at risk. Finally was able to speak those words, come out, and then we spent another 5 years journeying from married couple to separated anamkara. We still to this day deeply, deeply love each other. We are family. That will never, ever change. But we did not want the end of our marriage to simply be paperwork that shows up in the mail one day, stamped by a judge saying, you're divorced. That seemed wrong on every level. So this is before Priya Parker's work on meaningful gatherings was published. But we took matters into our own hands. We were coming up on our 20th anniversary. So we decided, well, why not on the spring equinox, our 20th wedding anniversary, we call those closest, most loving supporters into our lives, gather them together, and have another ceremony to release and transform our relationship. So we called it a release and transformation ceremony. We crafted it. It could not have been more opposite of our Mormon wedding 20 years before. But we carefully, I don't want to say scripted it out. We both wrote some words, but we did generate this beautiful ceremony that we decided would take place at dusk instead of dawn. And while the sun was setting, and we were lighting candles, and there were singing bowls, and a generous and loving mentor and shaman woman, a dear friend of mine, who led a ceremony that we crafted. And we ended our marriage that way instead of just this sort of sterile way. We got to the end of exchanging all of our words, and what we realized in a moment was we hadn't really created a signal to end it fully, at least our exchange. And as Stephanie finished her words to me in our exchange of sort of new vows as Anamkara and not a married couple, we looked at each other with a little bit of panic and thought, oh my God, do we kiss? What do we do? And we just sort of gave into it and said, well, of course, let's just, we have to kiss one another. And so we kissed one another and pulled back, and whew, I'm going to get really emotional for a moment. To what we would have experienced as linear points in time separated by 20 years converged into an absolutely single moment. And we burst out laughing. And all of a sudden, we experienced this breaking of time, as I would have come to think about it for a while. This idea that this line we perceived to be on had in fact brought both of those two distinct points together, living in the same moment. And our, at that point, present selves and past selves were literally inhabiting space-time simultaneously. It was incredibly healing of our past at that point in time, and set me up for where I am now. Across my lifespan, I have had very time-breaking moments. Some of them have been unanticipated, and some have been very intentional. And over the last year and a half, I've been on a journey to figure out what that is and to craft a practice around this. I cheekily call it breaking time, but obviously time is an immutable physical experience of the universe. And it's not something we can actually break, I don't believe. But what we can break are our perceptions and beliefs about time that limit our experience of presence to simply the present moment, which most of us here have probably spent years trying to engage in, really honing the craft of being fully present in the moment, to expanding back out our consciousness to the degree for which we can inhabit time much more fully and without the constraints of our sort of sensory limitations. So I have a couple of slides, Amy, I'd like to share just to kind of put some conceptual pieces in place. And then I would love to engage in some conversation with everyone about what I'm talking about here. So let's do that. Here we go. Time is a very interesting thing in that, and I was so delighted. I knew this would be the right audience to formally begin talking about this publicly for the first time after the last year of some deep work on this. Many metaphors that we experience as people tell us about time are of fear, oppression, bullying. We never seem to have enough of it. It seems to control our lives. Those of you who work in healing work, which is probably all of you in some fashion every day, hear these things. And sometimes we experience them as well. But when it really comes down to time as a physical law or substance or waveform or whatever the physicists are trying to figure out it is, they haven't quite figured it out either. We kind of come to this situation. David Foster Wallace is famous for this little story of asking a fish, "How is the water?" And the fish, of course, immersed in water its entire life, is a little puzzled. Well, what the hell is water? And I think time is like that for most of us as well. We have a biological inheritance as quantum beings. Our biology has been shaped by the force of time, the same way it has been shaped by temperature, gravity, motion. This is how our biology has originated. Time is both something we are in and is in us simultaneously. But our sensory and neurosensory systems, and this is something I can speak to, are really only adapted to experience, just so much of that. When we think about, for example, our sense of vision, vision for us is, in our current biological state, pretty limited to what we even label the visible light spectrum. It's only called that because of our sensory integration with this idea of light as a phenomenon, as a force in the universe. But of course, we know, because of scientific instrumentation, that that there's a lot more information and experience that the universe is putting out all the time that we're not sensitive to. And even as humans, with this incredible sensory system, there is a spectrum we experience of the visual light world. So we can think of this along not only the sort of what scientists would kind of call the bell curve, the normal curve, mathematically normal curve of what most people experience with our biology is in this visible spectrum. But of course, humans experience a whole spectrum, again, of light and vision, all the way from one end to those who do not experience vision, to those who experience vision perhaps but differently with some limitations. All three of my sons live with this, popular word, color blindness, popular culture word. So their experience of color is different. Ironically, my Stephanie is one of 12% of humans who experience tetrachromacy. She has a fourth sensory cone in her eye that actually gives her greater access to the richness of the visible spectrum beyond what most of us do. She sees more color than do I. My sensory experience on the very rich side is in taste. I'm one of those kind of strange people called a super taster. I have more density of taste buds than most of people around me. So I can very easily deconstruct a restaurant dish and make it at home with zero problem. It has its downsides, but most of the time it makes me an expert cocktail maker, by the way. But there is just this spectrum. And I really want to kind of put this out there to you, because as Edgewalkers, I have a very strong intuitive knowledge that in our sensory experience of this phenomenon of time in the universe, there are probably more people here that live in this end of the spectrum. We think about time, we have this sort of calendars and clocks, and we have created all kinds of systems that, like the fish in water, probably use something to, kind of conceptualize what this force is that they're immersed in all of the time. But I think most of us are limited to truly being able to perceive time in the present moment. We have this interesting capacity for memory, which allows us some access to the past, although with a little fuzziness most of the time. And for some of us, I think there's a little bit of fuzziness that allows us to access future. But I think the grand majority of our sensory experiences of most people living in that sort of one standard deviation of what it means to feel time as a quantum being means that we only kind of see things through this very narrow lens. All of our metaphors are about, you know, past, present, future. There's this idea of lineality or linearity to it. And that is kind of the limits of our perception. Our partners in quantum physics are coming closer to really believing that time isn't quite what we think it is, and that in fact, this multiverse of all possibilities, all times, and all places existing within one unified universe at a given moment is probably more likely than not to be what is really going on. But our biology creates this experience of us slowing things down. Things are very fuzzy. We, in this model, what's really interesting is we aren't objects or things. Nothing really is. Things we would look at objects, even a stone or a rock. You know, how many of us have collected a smooth rock, you know, worn by water and wind and sand, and considered it and found something beautiful about it and thought, isn't this a beautiful thing? But even that rock is an event. It is something that is as if we could see the whole totality of its existence simultaneously. We would see that it is something that was formed and something that will decay, and that there's this moment of sort of monotony in its existence as an event. So that is true for us as well. We're just on a different sort of quantum tuning than a stone. Now, kind of tapping in really quickly to some of my clinical knowledge work, a clinical expert in the phenomenon of ADHD, this idea of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. First, I just want to preface with, I work from a neurodiversity model, not a pathological model with that as a clinician and researcher. However, I've now come to a place where I've realized that I believe this is a diversity of quantum tuning more than anything else, that our brain as a quantum instrument built from the same particles the rest of the universe is built on, with an ability for the cells and the particles of our brains to be existing in quantum entangled states where particles, you know, particle physics tells us that particles can exist in 2 points in space-time simultaneously. It's a little mind-blowing, but those are the same particles that make up our entire biology. It would make sense that as a quantum instrument, just like our visual system, that there are tunings available. I think probably Edgewalker folks are more likely to be able to experience some fuzziness. Maybe you have had experiences like I shared in this this wedding and this release story of having moments in time where you apprehend that you're in two places and times sort of simultaneously. Or maybe you have foreseen an event or anticipated something, or even had the ability to reach out to an earlier version of yourself and send a message that was healing and necessary. I believe strongly that this is the practice we can actually cultivate. That if we get to a place where we feel at least proficient enough to silence our minds to be fully present in a given, what we would call moment, that opens the doorway for quantum presence, for us to be considering and using this quantum tool of our brains to inhabit time more fully, to reach out to the past, to take a moment we're experiencing in this linear world of ours or existence of ours, and make a quantum anchor, this idea that I want to be able to access this through my future self. And then also to reach out from where we are right now into the future and access the wisdom available to us from our future selves. I truly believe that. Two quick experiences, and then I would love to make this conversational. Healing the past, I kind of talked about that already, right? That was an experience that kind of just happened for conditions I wasn't really aware at the time. Holding on to the present, again, very early life experience. After the birth of my first child, I have 3 sons with Stephanie. None of them were particularly good sleepers. And so as a very young parent, I mean, I was 22, 23, with a child who wasn't sleeping, was very fussy and didn't want to ever fall asleep. I spent a lot of time on my back, on a mattress, generally on the floor, because he was really great at getting out of a crib, and singing this baby to sleep on my chest. And in that state of utter exhaustion, at one point in time, probably, maybe 7 months into his life, I can't pinpoint the specific age or date, but what I can tell you about is that I created a quantum anchor, and I did it with intention, because there was a night where I had been the happiest I had ever been for a brief moment, in that I finally had my own child, which was a long time need of mine to be a father. And this sweet little baby boy, and he's on my chest, and I'm on the floor on a mattress trying to keep him quiet and help him go to sleep. And I was so intently overwhelmed with emotion that I started crying, because I thought, as wonderful as this moment is, I know it won't last forever. I know that I will lose this moment, and I don't want to. And so I just got very, very quiet, and I said, I'm not going to let that happen. And I became probably the most present I'd ever been in my life. And I used every bit of my sensory information. And I'm closing my eyes right now just to inhabit that moment again, to feel him there. The smell of him, the sound of him, the exactness of him on my chest. I can absolutely fully inhabit that. And it's not just memory recall. I know that I created a quantum anchor, and I know that the quantum instrument of my brain allows me to access that to the present day as fully and with no diminishing value, the same way most of our memories are kind of fuzzy as we go on. So I believe we can use our tools to hold on to those moments. On the other side of the spectrum, I believe this also happens unintentionally. And I think at this point now, in my scholarly hat, with that hat on, I believe that most PTSD experiences can be best described as quantum anchors, that a breaking of time has occurred that is so significant for an individual that they continue to inhabit it over and over and over again, but maybe not necessarily with desire. So I think that this gives us a certain sense that, this quantum instrument is very real, and we probably need to learn to use our system in a way we haven't, we underutilize. Finally, reaching out to the future, I just want to share one more story. Fast forward several years to about the year just before I turned 30, I had been a business owner, a restaurateur, and we had just come a year and a half out of the world of 9/11, and which had thrown a lot of our economy, the retail world, the restaurant world, into upheaval. It was not quite as severe as the recent pandemic, but it was very, very shaping. And at a time where I had finally come to a place in my businesses where I was actually feeling very successful. I had 6 restaurants. I was working 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week for the first time in years. I wasn't seeing my children awake days at a time. I was incredibly unhappy. I was also deeply in the closet, and that was starting to really finally rear its head on my psyche. But there came a point in time where I felt like I could no longer stem the tide of what was happening financially. And I was on the brink of absolute financial ruin. My health was horrifying. My spiritual health was horrifying. My family life was horrifying. And I truly feared utter destruction. I was in a complete state of despair. And I was sitting in my office in one of my restaurants in front of my computer one night, in the lowest state of humanity, just so fearful about ever surviving all of this, that I had the wherewithal to remind myself, nothing lasts forever. There will be a point in the future where you are on the other side of this. And I thought, come and help me. Please, Aaron, come and help me. So I just opened up a document and I summoned myself. I literally reached out and said, please, please tell me that this is okay, that we survive this. And stream of consciousness, I just wrote myself a letter thinking this was sort of a journaling exercise, if nothing else. And I just got to the end of it. It was just a page. I looked at it carefully. I read it. I felt a sense of comfort, but it also still felt utterly unbelievable. It didn't describe every little aspect of my life or what was happening. It wasn't foretelling, but it was emotional truth. It was the exact comfort I needed on a spiritual level to survive the moment. And then within a few weeks, I shuttered my businesses, took the losses, and went into the future to become a nurse and professor and all of those things. About 6 years into the future from that point, I had a hard drive failure on a laptop, and I decided, I need to bring all these disparate files and drives and flash drives and floppy disks or whatever we still had at the time. I need to maybe preserve those a little better. And so I started compiling things, and I came across the letter to myself. And I thought, oh my God, I completely forgot about that. And I opened it up, and I kid you not, the voice that came out that was in the letter was my voice at that moment in time. It was the emotional state I was in those moments. It was, in fact, all okay. We had moved on. We had purchased a home. The kids were growing. My career was advancing. Everything in my life felt okay for the most part. I'm going to deal with the gay issue. But that Aaron read it and remembered in those 2 points again, connected across space-time. And it was, in fact, me reaching out to myself. I felt it, I apprehended it fully, and I was like, oh my God, this linear time thing is such an artifact of the general biology of my body. So here's what I want to offer. I've come to believe that if we can use 3 things, one, our sensory experience of time, and we can let go of our beliefs about potential limitations just based on everyday life and embrace this quantum instrument. If we can then add to that a very focused and deeply emotional state, the energy of activation, which I believe is required in order for this time habitation to actually occur. And we can have a very clear intention, those 3 pieces. I believe we can intentionally break time to heal our past, hold indefinitely an important present moment, and seek wisdom from the future. And I believe we can teach that successfully to others. And I have had some moments in the last year where I feel like I've finally been able to get this practice in front of people and have them experience it and make it very real. So with that very long TED Talk, thank you so much for your patience as I get there and set that up conceptually. I would love to enter some dialogue with all of you about your experiences of time and what might be coming up for you today and how we might work together to really understand better and utilize our quantum instruments. This is our inheritance. We were born of time, and it is in us as we are in it, more fully in our work. All right, Amy, what do we do next?
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Aaron. I I mean, I'm going to need to have you back on the podcast. I have a million questions that I'm going to maybe ask a little or hold off on, because I want to give all of the people that are joining us in the cafe today a chance to comment, thoughts, questions. If anyone wants to share what came up for you as Aaron was sharing.
Matt has his hand up.
Thanks, Judy.
Go ahead,
Matt?
Matt.
Hi, Aaron. This is amazing. I love your presentation. I had heard the podcast with Amy, and so I was expecting something completely different, but I love this. I wondered if you could talk further about the experience that you say is available to all of us. It reminds me of the Tibetan lineage holder Tulku Thondup, who in his book Boundless Healing says if you want to heal yourself of, he's talking particularly physical ailments, we need to do four things. One, have a very clear mantra. Two, visualize it very clearly. The third is to have a 100% belief that this is going to work for you. And the fourth, and the one that really stands out for what you just said, is to have a heightened emotional state. And he says this one is really important because it's kind of like the energy that mixes all of this together. So I was just wondering if you could, tell us more about how do we access this experience that it sounds so profound.
I really appreciate that, Matt. Thank you so much. I've just been giving this so much thought. I think earlier in my life, when I was so attracted to, sort of the mystical and magical experiences people would write about, things like, past life experiences, or, traveling outside of their bodies to other locations, or et cetera, foretelling a certain event, or having a very strong intuitive sense of an individual or something that was happening, and experiencing sort of mystical things like that as well. I kind of felt that some of the four conditions you talked about seemed like inaccessible magic. Like this, it's almost like, is Santa real? Well, if you believe, sure, and it's like, well, no matter how hard I could believe in, traveling back to a past life experience to sort of validate that for myself and know it was real, I couldn't just like on demand make that happen. So it felt like, well, is this actually something that's real, or is it not real? I think what I'm really encouraged by, and what for me is starting to really empower me to say, yes, actually, these things are real and accessible, is this, and maybe it's because my mind is a scientific mind, even though I'm also sort of a very intuitive mind. I got a PhD because clearly there's something in me that says science is a thing. But there's an emerging field of study called quantum biology, which is really looking at the mechanisms of this body of ours, or any creature, as being part of this quantum universe as well. And it's raising more questions than it's answering. But I truly believe that part of this, like the belief condition, is coming to understand really fully that this isn't magic. I mean, it may be mystical and magical, but it isn't something that exists in a universe that is in sci-fi. That our bodies are already programmed to do this, that the cells of our bodies, the particles of our bodies, exist in more spaces than what we perceive. We aren't rocks on the beach. We're events that are happening in time, which means our particles exist outside of what we're currently perceiving. This idea that we have we can manipulate this even with our visual sense, right? Anytime you look at like slow motion photography, right now, I think I see on social media a lot of little reels, right? Someone will do some beautiful slow motion photography of a water droplet hitting the surface, and we watch it slowly unfold into these incredible geometric patterns and shapes and motions, and it's breathtaking. And we don't see any of that in our current quantum tuning. But if we manipulate that, we actually can access it. I think it's the same thing with our perception of time. So I think that the energy of activation, also one of the conditions you mentioned, right? This intensely emotional state, that gets our brain hot. I mean, chemically hot. A lot is happening in our brain when we activate our limbic system. I think it's a very powerful driver, and it's necessary in order for our brain's particles to be activated in a quantum enough state for us to start seeing beyond what seems the physically static moment, if that makes sense. So physicists will say, like I've been looking at the quantum physics. I've been deep diving into this. Oh my God, it's crazy. But that there's some who think actually we probably could physically travel through time. Theoretically, it's possible, but it would take basically harvesting the energy of a black hole in order to even make the smallest leap backward or forward in time. And biology says, hold my beer, because things happen that shouldn't happen in the biological world from a physics perspective. Every tree you could ever possibly see with your eyes is a physics miracle in that language, because when you take an object and you create a vacuum inside of it, and you bring fluid up through a membrane or a tube, at a certain point, it can no longer travel up the tube. The pressures would create, if it could do it, would create something so severe that anything, I think it's above 6 feet, would actually like explode, implode, explode. It's like physics says it's not possible for us to do that. But then you walk through the redwoods and you're like, well, trees do this. Like they literally do this, and they don't explode or implode. I mean, a lightning bolt hits it and then releases all that pressure, and you bet absolutely it's going to happen. But there's something really interesting that happens in the biology of trees that allows for the tree to actually break that physics convention. So I'll stop there, but I guess what I'm saying is that this is much more real and accessible to us than we've ever perceived. And I truly believe that it's our willingness to just look at our typical experience of time as this linear thing in the present moment that keeps us from accessing more and more that's available to us. It's a long answer. Sorry. Oh, Ellis, I see a hand. Sorry.
Thank you, Aaron. Gosh, this is all so abstract with the references to physics and everything that it's hard for me to grasp it in a usable way. I have a lot of difficulty being mindful about my relationship with time. I don't think I have PTSD, but I spend a lot of time thinking about the past and worrying about the future and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about us having access to this quantum tool. What is a accessible, practical way that I can consciously sustain a different relationship with time or be mindful in real time? I'm only receiving this as a sort of theoretical, intellectual, abstract discussion. What can I do to make a change for myself using this tool?
I love that. I think for me, this is an emerging area of practice, and I would invite everyone here to start thinking about these ideas and being creative about how you might apply them. I can share what I have done and practices I have done that have really, really, really helped. So one, holding on to the present. Um, you can imagine in my work as a nurse, in those years where I was actively working, I'm no longer a nurse. I decided to retire my license, but obviously been in a lot of spaces with people where that very intense emotional energy of activation is very present. Not always in the greatest of circumstances, but sometimes in good circumstances, has given me kind of a foothold. Recently, I was with a very, very dear friend of mine who expressed that the conversation we were having and the connection in our relationship through very tearful eyes was something so meaningful that he wished he could hold on to that longer. And I said, well, you can do that. We can create this moment and break time, in my little cheeky phrase, and create a quantum anchor. And let's do that together. So it became a two-person guided meditative practice. And what I did was just physically guided him through a deep awareness of where he was in his body, the richness of the sensory experience, and invited him to reach out to his future self, not fixed in time, not 5 years, not 7, not 8, not whatever, just to say that this Joe somewhere in the future might want to come back to this moment. And what was very interesting is that as we went through this meditative experience, he became incredibly emotional. And as we ended the meditation, I asked him, what, tell me about your emotional experience, what was happening. And he said, it's really interesting, but I could feel my future self coming back to this moment. And in the couple of years since that time, we've connected. He'll reach out and say, I'm missing you tonight. I think I'm going to go back to our space. And he successfully is able to do that. So one, I think there's a meditative practice that could be used kind of with the concepts at hand. The other thing I have used, and I was doing this before I became a fan of Liz Gilbert and her work on creative living, but I use that same sort of meditative activative state and letter writing to reach out, not only to myself, but even to others, to find wisdom and help that can make me go forward with greater clarity. And I at times find myself reaching backward in time to seek something I've missed that might not be available to me otherwise. And that practice has been interesting because it has involved questions for other people, not me. So between this sort of what I would say is activation state, this idea of coming into a meditative state where you focus not just on becoming sort of mentally quiet and being very clear about the intention, but tapping into the emotional need and making it very real is kind of the access point. And conventions such as letters or conversations, etc., might be useful. I could see maybe there are folks here who use art or drawing or sketching. I don't really know. I'm opening this up to all of you to say, let's co-create practices together. And I would love to hear what you learn from them going forward. But I think the practicality is in taking practices that are maybe already core to us and simply shifting the intention for something very specific, and in ensuring that We are not in an emotionally neutral, peaceful state, but that we're in an emotionally activated state that has meaning to us. Probably the most accessible and powerful is love, to be honest. That's my experience anyway.
Thank you, Aaron. I think we've barely scratched the surface on this conversation today, but I'm just so grateful that you are here opening up this conversation. And my biggest takeaway is when you shared the moment about your son, I think I hear a lot of parents feel like, oh, you better enjoy this because it goes by so fast. There's like lots of phrases that parents are told in that way. And this is breaking time. That was breaking time for me. You can go back to that moment whenever you want because you put a quantum anchor there. And I think we can all creatively play with what do we want to have as quantum anchors for ourselves to break time. And then it takes away that I'm experiencing so much joy right now, but oh my gosh, it's going to go away. And it just takes that fear out of it. And it's like, oh my gosh, I can access this feeling or this moment whenever I want. So I think that's a new method that you've posed for us. We're almost at time. Before we hand it over to Judy for announcements, is there any closing thoughts you want to share with everyone that joined us today?
I would love to. I love the idea of a reclaiming for me from a former religious life, the idea of benediction. So I would love to leave you with a blessing, if I may.
Please.
Let me actually do that visually too. All right. This is a recent composition of mine, initiated by a dear friend in need in a given moment. So it's a little John O'Donohue shout out. I've sort of tried to channel my inner John O'Donohue. May the tides of density and upheaval subside and leave outstretched sands of openness and parsimony, where the distinctness of boundaries between elements reveal their underlying order, layer upon layer upon layer to your eyes. May the waves of multitude and congestion diminuendo and leave a pulse of rhythm and resonance that reveal their truth in direction and source, note by note, to your ears. May the currents of intensity and acuity unwind and lengthen and leave a flow of abundance and freedom that reveal your strength and the familiarity of motion, step by step, to your feet. May you trust your wayfinding as you have always done to bring you safely to here and now from then and there. May you love your pathway as you have always done to take you to where and when from here and now. May you know afore you the footprints of ancestors called strength. May you know behind you the footsteps of self called courage. May you know aside you the footsteps of fellow travelers called beloved.
That was beautiful. Thank you. Okay, Judy.
Wow, Amy and Aaron, thank you both for this very magical time together. Aaron, I know people are going to want to follow up with you, and Amy put your contact information in the chat, and we'll send that out in the next newsletter as well. And I'm one of those. I would love to follow up and have a conversation with you about some of these ideas and especially practices. And if there's anything that you want us to share with the community after this call is over, just let us know and we'll get the word out. So we do have Edgewalker cafes every month, And our next cafe I'll be hosting, and my guest will be Paul Haas, Haas, who is the symphony conductor for the local Northwest Arkansas Symphony here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. An extraordinary musician and talented conductor who has developed his own meditation practice that has transformed his life and created what he just comfortably calls bliss. He lives in bliss all the time, and it's simple. And Aaron, I loved what you said about things not being magic, but magical, because that means they're accessible, that we all have magic in us, and we all have opportunity to expand our capacity. And so Paul has a technique that he's going to share with us that he calls sensate yoga. And seems like we've got a lot of focus on embodiment in the various Edgewalker cafes we do, because there is that edge between our spirit and our physical being, that if we can integrate that, link it, yoke it, as yoga talks about, we expand our capacity, and we expand the good we can do in the world. And so Paul will be my guest. That's December 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern. And on January 30th, the person who's hosting the Edgewalker Cafe is Monica Ross, who's on this call today. And the title of her session is Navigating Our Edges with Confidence and Compassion. Monica, would you like to say a couple of words about that conversation?
I'll say a couple of words. It's still percolating within me, so my sense is that it's forming itself, but it will be very interactive, very embodied, and I'm hoping very magical. So yeah, I look forward to holding the space for all those who attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And also the last announcement is in February, we are kicking off an Edgewalker virtual self-paced program called Walking on the Leading Edge. It's one we also do in person or with Zoom sessions, but this will be a self-paced approach to doing this in your own time. And anyway, well, there'll be more about that. So that's coming up in February. I think that's all I have for announcements. Do any of the other Edgewalker facilitators have announcements of things that are, oh, wait, before I ask that, I do want to just underscore the importance of Amy and her podcast, and how she is always bringing in incredibly creative, deep, loving, thoughtful people like Aaron, like you today. And those podcasts are so meaningful and a wonderful resource. I put her link in the chat just earlier in the day. And you can download the chat by going to the chat box and seeing the 3 dots and clicking on that. And it says save chat. And so there's been a number of people, including Monica, who've listed some resources there. So please feel free to use that as an access to more information on the depth of this talk on breaking time, quantum presence. Anyone else have any announcements of things coming up that our community would like? Actually, I'm not on gallery view, so I can't see. Hold on a second. Okay, no one else? All right. So again, we're so grateful to have you here with us, Aaron, and so grateful to Amy to bring you in. This has been magnificent and really opens up more area for exploration. Oh, Monica, thank you. Remind us it's all about light and love. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Back to you, Amy and Aaron.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending today. I hope with Aaron's thoughts that it got us a foundation to have a creative jumping off point. No pun intended. And Aaron, thank you for the blessing, and thank you for the courage and the vulnerability that you had to show up and share this with all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. It's truly an honor, and I feel truly blessed today to have been here, and equally inspired by all of you. Thank you.